Meet Reed Lance Rosenthal, rancher, #1 best-selling award-winning author, and unabashedly, unapologetically on the right side of the outstanding issues of our generation. But don't try to fence him in. Sometimes his positions will surprise you, because Reed is definitely his own man, with his own opinions. You might love him, you might hate him, but you won't be able to stop listening. Step over to the right side with Reed.
Howdy, listeners and viewers around the globe, the Gulf to Canada, and right here in these United States, coast to coast. Reed Lance Rosenthal on the Right Side Radio and the Cowboys Take on all sorts of video channels. Just hit that subscribe. Hit that little bell. Pass this link on to your compatriots. Getting the word out is key, particularly right now, because the Democrats, as we're going to discuss in this show, they had a plan. The more I think about it, the more convinced I am. The more dots that show up, the more lines get connected. And they had a plan going into this election. And they have a plan now. And it's not for our benefit, nor the benefit of the United States of America, nor the incoming Trump administration. Because corruption is being exposed. Tentacles of money. Who decides who gets paid? Who gets paid, how much they get paid, and for what. Kind of the root of evil in our government. Trillions of dollars being wasted of our tax money. It's not their money. In fact, I bet you many of them get off scot-free, like Hunter Biden. Don't pay taxes, don't file taxes, play all sorts of games with taxes. But in this show, we're going to go over a little bit of what has been uncovered. I mean, just the tip of the iceberg. I'm going to tell you how it's being done because nobody's talking about it. It's just this kind of amorphic Elon Musk out there. Oh no, this was a plan that Trump had. He's had 4 years to think about this. Elon has had some time to think about this. And Elon, of course, has the brains and the capacity and the contacts to put together the team to snake through the labyrinth of distortion, obfuscation, and corruption, treason that permeates our government. We have about 20 departments, but did you know that we have 2,000 sub-departments, smaller agencies under those major cabinet-level departments? Think about all the graft and corruption that's going on. You've only heard about the Treasury Department and USAID right now. By the way, this whole thing is a psyops, right? It's been uncovered that the press is getting, I'm going to talk more about this, millions of dollars from the funneled to them by these illicit agencies and agents of the status quo being corruption and treason and anti-American, hooray for me and too bad for America viewpoints, which the left, shall we say, has had for a long, long time, which will tie into what I'm going to be telling you today. Because I don't think anybody, as far as I can see, has presented to you the concepts I'm going to present to you today. And I want you to think about them. Pass them on. Talk with your buddies. Pass on the link. Do what you have to do. Get people thinking. As I've said many times over the past few months, this war isn't over, folks. The election was just one battle. We're engaged in the war now. The war to save our country, our finances, our freedoms, and our personal finances. And security, I might add. So, first, I'm going to start with the founders' quotes, which I think is right on tap with this show that I'm bringing you today. Let's talk about corruption and what the founders thought of corruption, which in many terms is also treason. Okay, corruption is another invincible enemy of freedom. It undermines the confidence of the people in the government and its institutions. It erodes the very foundation upon which our nation was built. That was James Madison. How about Thomas Jefferson? Quote, Corruption is the enemy of revolution and the friend of tyranny, unquote. How true that is. You saw the tyranny of Obama. You saw the tyranny of the last 4 years, which was Obama's third term, under the guise of cadaver. This can only be done, folks, by distorting the system, by funneling the money, by playing on people's greed, avarice, and ideology. Before we get into that, let me give you the ranch story. So we have they say, brutal cold wave coming in. It looks like it's arrived with snow and all sorts of things going on. And the whole key is to be prepared when this stuff comes in, particularly when you're in the middle of nowhere on a big sprawling ranch. Unfortunately, my ranch lieutenant, and if you've been following the show, you know he has suffered some personal setbacks in the last several months, 3 deaths in immediate family. I mean, feel badly for the guy. He's at one of those funerals for a few days, so I am running the show myself. And it's not that I have, anything else to do. But I happen to love the work, always have. And yesterday I spent a great deal of time making sure all the machines were plugged in, that those that we're going to have to use during this cold snap to feed or otherwise are in the barn and covered. Saves them a little bit from the cold permeating their loins, otherwise known as batteries and engine and fuel. And I got out a hay bale and I took the wrap. The hay bales, when they're baled, have a wrap around them, kind of keeps them together and helps a little bit with weatherproofing. And we feeded nets, which saves a lot of hay, for the horses, that is. The cows are a different story. And those wraps on the bales, once the net, which kind of slows down the rate at which horses consume hay, once the net is on the bale, it's kind of a pain in the butt to take the wrap off. And out in about a 50-mile-an-hour wind yesterday, I managed to take the wrap off the bale while it was suspended on the forks of the reach lift and got her fed. Now, the horses haven't found it yet, so, maybe it was all for naught. And then I got the plow up here to the main house, parked it right outside, give or take 50 feet. The front door, pointed downhill, just in case there's a whole bunch of snow and you need a running start, and plugged in the oil pan warmer. Did the same with my truck and several other machines. The point of this is, if you know what's coming or you know what's arrived, you want to be prepared. PPPPP, prior planning prevents poor performance. And that kind of ties right in with this show, because we always knew what was going on. I was the first to bring you the stories of the shadow government. This is back in Obama's day when I first began this show. And I told you there was a shadow government going on. Now, the same people who instituted and who live by and profit by the shadow government are now the people screaming loudest at the shadows getting light, of course. But the shadow government is what really runs things. That portion of the blob, which is the United States government, or what it has grown to be, that portion of the blob that determines who gets how much for what and when, and who's gotten very good at hiding all the flows. You may be interested to know that Trump and Elon and their team have been planning what they're doing right now for a very long time. This is not like he got inaugurated and they had an idea and off they went. The team was assembled, more than 1,000 people, lawyers, specialized computer analysts, particularly those involved with financial tracking algorithms. And literally, during and immediately after Trump's inauguration speech, they were locking buildings, locking down systems, locking employees out, and infiltrating all the systems which have been hiding the graft, corruption, and treason for decades, accelerated under Obama and his, shall we say, communist radical Islamist leanings, his anti-American leanings. I mean, don't believe me? Read his book. Listen to his speeches. I mean, you don't have to listen to me. He told you everything you need to know about what he thinks about the United States of America and this system, I might add. And anybody who is not a minority, a victim, or disadvantaged as he defines those terms. You know, their voting constituency. Anyway, these analysts, really, really bright people, and obviously Elon Musk has an in to that whole crowd. They began work within an hour of Trump's inauguration speech. They were into the systems in the Treasury Department and into USAID immediately. And they locked out everybody who was trying to not give them information. You've heard those stories. And everybody who could manipulate or change or otherwise block them obtaining the information. And the algorithms that they're using are specialized. What they do is they connect financial dots. Here's a dollar that went into USAID. Here's a dollar that went out of USAID. Here's where that dollar went when it got to the recipient. Who was the ultimate beneficiary? Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. These are really advanced, sophisticated systems. And what they have uncovered is simply breathtaking. And you've heard little bits and pieces about what's going on. By the way, folks, I don't have the time. It would take days to go over all that's been uncovered. Some great articles and some great videos from a whole bunch of different people, including, by the way, a terrific speech by Senator Kennedy from Louisiana, whom I love, on the Senate floor, as to what is being uncovered out there in this Blitzkrieg algorithmic attack on the shadow government I warned you about 8 to 10 years ago, and the deep state, as it's come to be called, on the rightsideradio.com. Also, there's some terrific articles on COVID. This is just a little sidelight here. We'll get back to the main thrust of this show shortly, although it all ties into the corruption. But now there's a concerted effort to remove all mRNA jabs from everything, from the market entirely, as vaccines entirely, and to outlaw and stop immediately the use of any more COVID jabs, which have maimed and debilitated tens, if not hundreds of millions of people around the world and killed millions more in concert with the advice not to use ivermectin, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. These articles are amazing. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it on the show, but you should read them, and they will be under family safety on the COVID page. That's the links up in the upper right-hand corner for the special pages that we have. And all these factoids, these tidbits I'm bringing you will be under Treason, rat-a-tat-tat. The videos will be under the audio bar also, in certain cases under family safety, and under Trump resistance, which is another page and link that we have. So please, on the rightsideradio.com, visit the website. The link is in the description below, whatever platform you happen to be on, and pass those on. This is a wealth of information, way too much for me to cover in any show or any series of shows, actually. All right, so back to the main thrust here, corruption. You've heard about the press getting millions of dollars under the table through USAID and other agencies. You've heard about the State Department, which supposedly runs USAID, spending $8 million of your tax money on Politico subscriptions. This is a left-wing rag digital magazine, along with the New York Times, who got money, WAPO, who got money, and other outfits who got money. $8 million. This was for 176,000 subscriptions, which, by the way, were all taken out in the same day. Now, USAID, folks, only has 10,000 employees, which is about 9,990 too many. Elon's taking care of that. This is the type of corruption which has been going on. Politico, in fact, couldn't meet their payroll last week. They blamed it on a technical glitch. So that is how funded the left-wing media is by the United States government, i.e. you and me. This is so they can lie to us, play psyops games with us, distort the truth, omit the truth, hide the truth, play the party line, and of course, censor everything you and I think. Or the other side, shall we say, the American side, thinks. This is how deep the corruption has gone. And NPR. Do you remember when Nancy Pelosi, what a peach. Remember when she stuck $75 million of funding in for NPR in the COVID bill? Well, that wasn't the only funding of your money that was going to NPR, who can't stand you, you plebes, you deplorables, you wretches, you dregs, all the things they've called you. No, they also got money out of USAID, the State Department, and other sources. The algorithms are crawling along the money track as we speak. So we have we have a situation here where the Democrats are becoming unhinged. Trump has taken a page out of Obama's playbook. He's hitting them hard in innumerable places all at once. Tough to react, right? I've complained about that in this show when the Democrats were in power, the anti-Americans were in power for years. Well, he's taken a play out of their playbook. Good for him. And with the team assembled and ready to go and hitting the ground running literally while the inauguration was going on, everybody's been caught flat-footed. They figured they would use the age-old, attack the personal character of the people who are doing it, which they're trying to do. Attack the humanitarian impulse of the American people. Oh, the poor kids in Ghana aren't getting food because USAID has been shut down. Let me tell you how deep this rot goes. USAID, which the media likes to call USAID, that's not what it is. That is their name game, their name changing, their little psyops nonsense that they play on all sorts of things. United States of America International Development. That's what USAID stands for, not US aid. And this was supposed to be a projection of soft power. And some soft power is needed by any country and certainly by a superpower to make sure you get the goods and services, to make sure the supply chain stays open, to make sure that, shall we say, friends rather than enemies are in high important places and think right in other countries and other parts of the world. But that's not what it's been used for. Quite the contrary. In fact, this is just a small list. You may have heard some of these, but I flat guarantee you haven't heard them all, okay? $2.3 billion to Somalia, which included $200,000 for global warming preparations. $3.7 billion to Afghanistan. That's Afghanistan, folks. That's the Taliban. Do you remember Joe's retreat, ignominious retreat from Afghanistan? And the 13 American servicemen who needlessly died because his commanders on the ground didn't have the cojones to say pull the trigger when they had the terrorists in their sights and were asking for permission to fire to engage. 16 million, by the way, of that is to promote positive masculinity in Afghanistan. 3.4 billion to Yemen. You know, the Houthis who are shutting down shipping and sending rockets at American warships. Cool. That was for, by the way, an art exhibition. An art exhibition, yes. $700 million to Iraq, which included, by the way, an opening of a movie theater. A movie theater. $3.4 billion to Syria. That included, by the way, 1 million COVID masks 4 years after the pandemic, when science has proven, despite Fauci's protestations to the opposite, that masks don't mean squat. $1.1 billion to Lebanon to promote youth activism. Youth activism in Lebanon. Let's see, who's in Lebanon? Oh, that's right, Hezbollah, that the Israelis are fighting, using weapons and money lent by or given by the United States, i.e. the taxpayers. I mean, these agencies are creating conflict that you are then spending more money to prop up our side of the conflict. I mean, this is a boondoggle of unimaginable proportions. Unimaginable proportions. And one of the things which is allowing this is the very powerful federal employees unions, who are just as corrupt as virtually every other union. And if you happen to be a union member and you don't like what I'm saying, TS. You get your unions under control. You start controlling how they spend their money and what political organizations and campaigns they support, and I'll change my mind on unions. In the meantime, unions, for the most part, are a way for the people at the top to get rich, for them to wield power, for them to be part of the apparatus which is now being uncovered by the financial algorithms and Elon Musk's team of 1,000 out there, working as we speak, round the clock. And they're the ones who are standing in the way. In fact, they've filed several lawsuits. We're going to talk about that a little later in the show when we talk about the resistance, the plan to resist Trump, the plan that was in motion before the election, before he was ever elected, by the way. In fact, folks, his election itself is part of the plan, I think. But more on that here in just a few minutes. Did you know that only 6% of federal employees were showing up in person for a full work week? 6%. 6%. If you take out the security guards, the janitors, and the maintenance personnel, it drops to 1% of the federal workforce. The feds employ 4.5 million people, almost 1 million of them added in the last 2 years of Obama's third term, i.e. Cadaver's final 2 years. Did you know that in addition to there's 15 cabinet positions, not 20. There's 2,000 federal agencies. We're only into 2 of them. 2 of 2,000. Do you have any idea how much money is going to be saved and what's going to be uncovered? I certainly hope people get prosecuted, go to jail, and in some cases suffer the ultimate penalty for treason. Because that's the only way you're going to solve this stuff. If you don't start holding people accountable for what they do, then they're going to continue to do it, one way or the other. Did you know that leasing and maintenance costs for federal buildings cost $15.7 billion per year? That's $15.7 billion of your tax money. And that the occupancy of these buildings is 12%. 12%. In other words, they are 88% unoccupied, and we're paying to maintain them. $15.7 billion per year. Did you know that the cost of illegal immigration, and there's various estimates and various things are included in various estimates, has now approached over $1 trillion over the last 2+ years under Obama's third term? When you start adding all this up, we're talking about a waste of trillions. And if you remember correctly, Obama third term cadaver speeded up those payments, speeded up the amount of money, increase the amount of money that was going out the door, increase federal employment, people that don't come to the office, who stay at home and get their check from your wallet. That's right, your taxes. And now scream about the fact that they may be let go. Look, to put this in its simplest perspective, if you take a look at all the money that was spent over the last 4 years, and particularly in the last 2, and particularly in the last one, when they knew, and this will be part of what I'm going to bring you about what I think the plan is, when they knew they weren't going to win, this is deliberate sabotage. Think about Janet Yellen, an avowed, by the way, socialist/communist. Read her papers from her college days. I mean, I don't need to tell you what they say. Read it for yourself. It's like reading Obama's writings. She was in charge of the Treasury, and she was in charge of the Treasury with a mission: dig a hole that we would never get out of. And one of the things she did to dig that hole is to buy. So when you issue debt as the United States Treasury to finance these trillions of wasted dollars, you have to issue T-bills, T-notes, T-bonds, all that kind of stuff. They have varying rates of maturity from 3 months, there might even be a 1 month out there, I'm not sure, but from 3 months up to 30 years. Now think about what interest rates were back when Yellen was appointed by Obama's third term. They were zero. You could get a 30-year bond for 0%. And the government was selling trillions of dollars of bonds every year, or trillions of dollars of Treasury notes, financings every year. Did Yellen take advantage of getting our debt to zero interest for the next 30 years, which could have been done with a snap of her fingers? No. Instead, she bought the much more expensive short-term bonds, which at that time were like 1 or 2%. They weren't much. But they have to be rolled every 3 months or 6 months or 1 year. And obviously rates have risen. Thank you, Federal Reserve. Rates have risen now to where they are 4%, 5%. I mean, it depends what the debt instrument is or what the financing instrument is. And that is one of the big reasons why you combine it with the deficit, which they also purposely inflated, particularly in their last 6 months in office, spending $788 billion in 6 months. $788 billion. Actually, it was 3 months because it starts in October. $788 billion, the most ever spent in a single quarter in American history. All of it deficit spending. Not a penny of it covered by tax revenues. And all of it financed by Yellen's short-term financings, which were rolling over at much higher interest rates, which means the interest expense on that $788 billion and the other trillions that she purposely manipulated at the behest of Obama and his ilk. That's why we're paying $1.5 trillion a year in interest, folks. And when you're paying $1.5 trillion a year in interest, and that's a quarter, give or take, of your total tax revenues, you have a big problem. And even a kindergartner would know about, do I want to take a loan at 0% for 30 years, or do I want to take a loan at 3% that I have to roll at higher interest rates for 3 months? And Yellen was supposed to be really smart, really smart. I mean, if you ever watched her testimony, you would doubt she has a living brain cell. But she was smart enough to put us in a hole. And the people who directed her were smart enough to know the hole could be dug, and it could be dug deeply. So you have the vestiges of, and I can keep going, okay, Ukraine. The tens of billions that were pumped out to Ukraine in the final months of the Obama third term Biden cadaver administration. The 5,000 employees, thank you, Elon's algorithms, of the FBI, 1/3 of the workforce that were working on J6 stuff 4 years after J6. Never mind terrorists, never mind the open borders, which the director, Mr. Wray, warned us of time and time again, yet 1/3 of his workforce was on J6 matters. The Iranian oil embargo. Trump had Iran on their knees. They were broke. And if you want to affect regime change and avert a war, you get rid of the regime, and that should make some significant changes in how Iran interacts with and operates in concert with the world and with Israel. What did Obama, who's always loved Iran, and Biden do? They turned their head from the sanctions that Trump had put on the oil. They allowed Iran to sell hundreds of billions of dollars of oil and therefore enrich itself, rebuild its coffers, and, oh yes, fund Hamas. Remember October 7th, invasion of Israel? Fund Hezbollah, and fund the Houthis. Now, if you don't think this was anti-American and you don't think these people are smart enough to know what was going on, you underestimate their devious intelligence. And then, of course, we have the granddaddy of them all, the theft of the $300+ billion of U.S. treasuries that Russia was holding as part of its reserves, which was like pouring gasoline on the flicker of flame that was the BRICS countries at that time. It's now a roaring inferno. Nobody's going to stick around. If they see you steal somebody's car, they're not going to park their car in your driveway, folks. Not going to happen. The same with international finance. Nobody could have not known that if they stole one country's money, all the other countries were going to pull their funds. Think about that in concert with what Yellen is doing to sell debt on short-term, ever-increasing interest rate rollover debt rather than long-term zero-interest debt. All this is interconnected. All this is interconnected. And then we have the nationwide, we have the ACLU, and I have several articles posted, by the way, on what they are doing, the lawsuits they filed, etc. There's been almost 30 lawsuits filed in just the last week by the Federal Employees Union, the ACLU, state governors, NGOs who were involved in getting all their money, from the illegal immigration, the hordes of illegal aliens, many of them criminals, pouring across our border at further expense to the U.S. taxpayer. In the last week or so, several courts appointed by Obama, Clinton, or Biden, must be a coincidence, have stopped Trump's buyout plan, wherein Elon and the crew offered all federal employees a buyout. We'll pay your salary all the way out to September or October in one lump sum, your health care, the whole 9 yards, if you agree to leave. 60,000 federal employees, which, by the way, is simply a dent in the bucket that needs to be emptied, have taken the government up on that. Hopefully many more will. But now a judge has stepped in and said he's not sure that's legal, really. And then we have another judge who's looking at whether or not everything that Doge, Elon Musk, the web crawlers, the algorithms, all the stuff that's being exposed and the money that's being shut down is legal. Well, the USAID, which is not U.S. aid, despite what the New York Times and the other left-wing rags who are financed by it are saying, that was established in the 1960s. And it allows the President of the United States to, with a stroke of the pen, no communication, no notice, no warning, no vote by Congress, to shut it down. That's the law. Yet you have a judge that's actually looking at whether this is legal or not, or constitutional. And then you have other judges trying to get involved in slowing down the termination of employees or the infiltration of U.S. systems by these web specialists who are uncovering this sordid, interconnected trail of treason, crime, corruption, and anti-American funding. You have another judge who has now issued a nationwide injunction against birthright citizenship, including birthright citizenship if a child is born to illegal aliens here illegally. You got to think about this. Did you know that 400,000 kids qualified under the old rules for American citizenship last year? Birthright citizenship. And did you know that shadowy portions of that law, funded by shadowy portions of various agencies, including USAID, the State Department, the Department of Defense, and you name it, did you know that every one of those kids can invite for kind of automatic, not citizenship, but recognition, green cards, etc., any of their closest relatives out to like their grandfather, grandmother, sister, siblings, mother, and father. So the effect is not 400,000 people, it's millions of people who now have a loophole around an immigration system which had the doors wide open to begin with. The CTA, right? The Corporate Transparency Authorization, or Act. This is where every small business in the country under 20 employees or 5 million in revenues has to put down all their ownership, beneficial, it's hours of work by every small business. That's hours they can't be hiring people, conducting their business, or doing other things. A specific drain on productivity. That was implemented in the final months of cadaver Obama's third term. In other words, undermining small business. And what is small business? Small business is the engine of employment. 87% of all new jobs are by small business. More sabotage. And then we have lawfare, okay? They've sued Doge. They've sued the Justice Department under Biden, went to the Supreme Court to keep in place that accountability procedure for small businesses, which I was just telling you about. They've gone to court now to stop deportations of illegal aliens. They referred the justices of the Supreme Court, guess who, to the DOJ for possible criminal investigations, tying up the justices. That, fortunately, was thrown out by a judicial board before it got into the clutches of the DOJ. So, and by the way, one other thing. The Clinton judge who was appointed, who has put a stay on this buyout offer, Bill Clinton did the same thing, folks. He did a buyout offer for federal employees, just to show you how hypocritical and corrupt this system is. So we can go on forever about what they are uncovering, but I think it's part of a much bigger plan. Did you notice that this election was pretty much absent of voter fraud, drop boxes, machines altering votes, people being denied access, poll watchers to watch the vote counting, etc. All the stuff that went on in 2020. Obviously, they had all the tentacles in place, they had the machinery in place, but they didn't pull the trigger on it, except just enough so that you wouldn't be too suspicious, in my view. And they ran Kamala Harris, and they wanted to make sure she ran, so they didn't have your normal, quote unquote, save democracy votes by delegates for an alternate to Cadaver. They wanted Kamala to run. Why did they want Kamala to run? Because Kamala was a liability. Kamala is a buffoon. She's an embarrassment. She couldn't figure her way out of a paper bag. And they had to get rid of her. She's the vice president, after all. They had to get rid of her somehow. There's no better way to get rid of somebody than to have them lose a big election. They're toast. They're done. So they got rid of Kamala. At the same time, they put up a candidate which they were pretty damn sure wasn't going to win. They were pretty sure Trump was going to win. And then they set about rigging the system so that the collapse, the implosion of this system would be on Trump's watch. Remember that communists and lefties think long term. They're not short term thinkers. Communists, lefties, socialists, aided and abetted by Russia and China and other communist nations, started infiltrating our education system more than 50 years ago. We see that they've been quite successful. All you got to do is watch college campuses. They have a whole plan, just as do the Islamists, the beehive theory. I've brought you shows on that. Just type it in the archives on the rightsideradio.com. This is a long-term plan. And there's no better way to get people back on their side than to have the other side, i.e., the American side, the Trump side, the government accountability side, the freedom side, the non-censorship side, fall flat on their face in a huge fiscal implosion. And they have done everything in their power to set up just such a fiscal implosion, well, during the whole term of Barack Obama, as much as they could, because Trump didn't know what was happening behind the scenes during Trump's first term, and absolutely positively, without a doubt, all stops out during Cadaver/Obama's third term. This is a trap. They wanted Trump to win. They expected him to win. They purposely ran a candidate that could not win, and in the process got her out of the top echelons of the party, which they had to get done. And part of their plan was to continue the deep state shenanigans that I've described briefly, tip of the iceberg. I mean, we're just 2 weeks in, folks. 2 weeks. By their old playbook: attack the messenger, hide the goods, obfuscate the story, continue the funding, play the games. They didn't count on an organized Trump team hitting the ground literally during the inauguration speech. They didn't count on the systems being locked up, on employees being locked out. They're in their own little world, oh, they won't do that. It never even occurred to them because, people would be angry. They wouldn't like them. I think you have a team in there right now who doesn't give a damn if they're liked or not. They're going to get the job done. And it's going to be a really rocky road, filled with lawfare, filled with threats. I mean, there's all sorts of threats being levied now against the life, career, assets of virtually everybody on the Trump team. Never mind just Trump himself. And I want you to think about my theory. They expected Trump to win. They let Trump win. And they set up what they thought would be a sure, big time. This is not a little time. This is big time failure. Fiscal, financial, international, you name it. And Trump knew they were doing it. And so did his team. And they took steps. You know, it's like chess: move, counter move, counter move. It's like a wrestling match. Your opponent is throwing a move, you know the counter move, he's already thinking about the counter move to your counter, etc. And in their righteousness, in their my poo-poo doesn't stink attitude, everybody else is more stupid than we conviction. They never thought about what's occurring now. But make no doubt, this is a war for the soul of America. It's a war for your pocketbook. It's a war for your freedoms. And it's a war for the Constitution. And we're in the middle of it. It has just begun. I'm interested in your comments. Please type them in the spaces below wherever you're listening on this: YouTube, Rumble, Brighteon, Predion, Gab, Truth, you name it. And think about my big thesis here. This was a trap. Trump knew it. And now the war is on. I'm going to be bringing you some really interesting information on the history of corruption in the United States government, because history, you know, the touchstone of the past is the guidepost of the future. And you will see remarkable, I mean, not at the sophisticated level with digital and all that kind of stuff that you're seeing uncovered now, literally minute by minute, by the algorithms and the team. But you're going to see a disturbing pattern of corruption in the United States government, which has grown and festered and metastasized, and which now needs to be exorcised like the cancer it is. Remember the founders' quotes I brought you. This is Reed Lance Rosenthal on the Right Side Radio and the Cowboys Take. You keep the wind at your back. I'll be talking to you in a few days with the history of United States government corruption.
Please remember, if you've missed any shows, just click on Show Archive and you'll find all of his shows. We look forward to seeing you here again next week for another episode of Reed Lance